Good morning and welcome to the webinar. This is Megan Mansfield from Ocr Company. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar from Avid Exchange titled TimberScan with AvidPay for Sage 300 CRE. Our presenter today is Jim Talbot, Account Executive in Construction Sales at Avid Exchange. Before we get started, I want to address a few housekeeping items. Everyone is muted for a clean listening experience. If you have any questions, please type them into the questions box. We will collect the questions and address them at the end of the session. For the best viewing experience, please maximize your screen. Today's webinar is being recorded and a link to the webinar will be provided via email. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Jim.
All right, thanks Megan. Good morning everyone. Thanks for your time. As Megan mentioned, we're going to go through TimberScan's AP invoice and payment automation system for Sage 300 CRE. I'm not going to spend very much time in PowerPoint, but I do want to give you an overview of TimberScan at a high level, and then I will jump right into a product demonstration. And after that, we will go through payment automation. So starting with TimberScan, we have 5 steps to get an invoice through the process in TimberScan. This screen here just gives a nice overview of the product, show you the flow of an invoice through each of those steps, with the first one being the acquire step. So obviously somehow these invoices need to get into TimberScan, and the easiest way to do that is through email. If you have your vendors emailing you their invoices today and you're giving them a specific email address to send those invoices, what we'll do is we'll monitor that email address, and as invoices come in, we'll extract the invoice from those emails automatically and bring it directly into TimberScan. So this first step, typically the acquire step, is automated. There's nothing you need to do. For your vendors that are still emailing, you need to scan those and get those into TimberScan that way. We don't have any special requirements on the scanner. It could be a dedicated scanner, but it doesn't have to be. It could be a copier with a scanning function. Some of our clients using the scanning copier, they tend to go to a folder by default. So if you have a copier with a scanning function and by default it wants to go to a Windows folder, no problem. You can continue that same process and you can just drag and drop from that folder to get those into TimberScan. Once the invoices are in TimberScan, you'll do your data entry in TimberScan. So to facilitate that, what we do is we read the business logic that's in Sage. So your entry screen that you have in Sage today, and by that I mean the layout of the columns, when you enter an invoice in Sage, you'll have that exact same layout when you enter the invoice in TimberScan. So whatever settings that you have in Sage, as far as, perhaps you want to break out use tax, etc., you'll see those exact same columns when you enter the invoice in TimberScan. You'll also, of course, because of the tight integration, you'll of course have access to your same vendors, jobs, cost codes, GL accounts, etc. You also get the same warning. So for example, if you're entering an invoice in Sage today and a vendor's insurance has expired, for example, and you get a notification of that, you get an alert that comes up in Sage, you'll get that same alert in TimberScan. We deploy optical character recognition. So one of the advantages of entering the invoice through TimberScan, of course, is that we're going to make your life easier doing that. One of the ways we do that will provide more information for you to access when you're entering an invoice, and I'll show you some of that. But we also provide optical character recognition, and what we're doing there is reading the information off those invoices and filling in some of the data entry fields for you. So your process can be, as an invoice comes in, it's emailed to you. It gets acquired into TimberScan automatically. it'll go through the OCR. If you're using that part of the system, it'll go through the OCR automatically. So when you get to invoice entry in TimberScan, you'll not only have the invoice there, the invoice image that you can view, but when you go to enter that invoice, those data entry fields, majority of them will be filled in for you already. So this should save you quite a bit of time. A lot of our clients, saving about 90% for the ones that are using OCR. After the invoice is entered and saved in TimberScan, you can have it go out for approval. So if you have project managers or supers or whoever you want to look at these invoices today and approve them, you'll set up workflows in TimberScan. So once the invoice is saved, what TimberScan does is look at these workflows to decide who this invoice should go to, if anyone. So you can define, hey, maybe certain invoices, if they're overhead, et cetera, don't need to go for approval, and other ones do. And those rules you'll set up in the workflow are very flexible. So it could be a sequential workflow where perhaps it needs to go to a project manager for approval. But if it's over a certain dollar amount, for example, you might say, hey, if it's over $10,000, not only does the PM need to approve it, but it needs to go to another user as well. So you'll define all those rules in TimberScan. Once the invoice is saved, it goes out for approval. The approvers, they don't need to download an app or anything. They just need access to the internet. And they'll go log into TimberScan via the web, see the invoices that are with them for approval. They'll get an email to let them know they have new invoices to approve. If you do have some users that are slow to respond historically, approving invoices, you can set up notifications and remind them that they have invoices in their queue. Please review. The approvers can do their approval from a smartphone, tablet, PC, however they choose to do it. Again, they just need internet access. Back up just a minute here. I do want to mention we have a credit card system. So not only in addition to invoices, we have a credit card app where users can take pictures of receipts, say, put it to a job and a cost code or a GL account. And those will go through an approval process and land here in TimberScan. So if you have credit card receipts that also need to go out to project managers for their approval, you can use a credit card app to do that. They'll come in as invoices into TimberScan. You'll see a picture of the receipt, any coding. You can make any adjustments if needed. And then as you save that into TimberScan, it'll go out to whoever for approval as well. If those receipts don't need approval, then you can tell the system, hey, those credit card items, I just want them to come over to this final review step where someone is going to check them over, and when they approve them, it sends them to Sage 300. So that same flow is consistent. So for the approvers that are approving invoices, which may or may not include credit cards, once they approve it, usually there's a final reviewer. So what you're doing there is you're designating a certain person or persons in your office, typically an admin user, that's going to review any notes that came in from the approvers. And at that point, they can make any changes they need to the system, change the coding, maybe add additional documents if they like. They could reject it, send it back to the PM, hey, are you sure this is the right cost code, et cetera, something like that. But once that final reviewer gives it their okay, that sets it up to go over into Sage. When the invoice is in Sage, you can view it in Sage 300. You don't necessarily have to be a TimberScan user. And of course, you can search for it in TimberScan. When the invoices are ready to pay, and I'll go through this in a bit more detail after we go through TimberScan, is the ability to pay the vendors. So this is where Avid Exchange, AvidPay will come into play, where you can pay your vendors electronically. and present them, give them options on how they want to be paid, whether they want to continue to get a check or maybe some electronic options. Again, I'll go through that in more detail once we get through TimberScan AP invoice automation. All right, with that, I will break out of Microsoft PowerPoint and go into TimberScan. So when TimberScan is installed, you have an icon on your desktop, looks something like this. You go ahead and log in, and that builds the menu tree across the top. So this structure here is based on security. So for my login today, I'm logged in as an admin user, so I'm seeing everything the system has to offer. But if you have certain users that you only want to access certain parts of the system, this tree menu will shrink down based on their security settings. The first step is to go in and acquire. So again, this step is automated for the ones you're receiving via email. For the ones you're having to scan in or acquire manually, I'll call it, this would be the process. So what I'll do, I'll go ahead and just take an invoice, just drag it off my desktop here and show you what that looks like. So when you're scanning in an invoice, it'll pop up here, and you can go ahead and over on the right, there's some options for annotations. Let me just make that a little bit bigger. So you can circle certain things, or maybe put in a sticky note, something like that. There's some notes for the approver, or however you wanted to do it. And then down at the bottom, you need to identify the image type. So today, primarily, we're talking about invoices, but it's good to know that TimberScan is a full AP automation system, so you can use it for any type of document. So whether it's perhaps W-9s that you want to attach to the vendor file, signed change orders that you want to attach to the job file, you just define those document types in TimberScan. And when you do those, you also define the indexes, the fields that you want to search for on those documents. So for a W-9, it just might be the vendor. And then when you're doing that, when you're setting up the document type, you can also tell TimberScan that you want to view this W-9 when you're in Sage. So when you're in Sage in the vendor file, you could click on the paperclip icon and go ahead and call up that W-9 if you like. All right, so for today, I'm just going to say this is invoices. My data entry group is just going to direct this group of invoices to a certain user or a group of users. And I go ahead and click process, and that sends it into the next step, which is AP invoice entry. So again, that was for invoices that I have to scan into the system that I'm acquiring manually. The ones you're acquiring via email, you'll use this function here, the email monitoring. So this is where you're telling TimberScan, hey, if the invoice comes in my example here, I don't care who it's from. If it comes to this email address that I've given my vendors on where to send their invoices, TimberScan's going to go ahead and acquire these automatically into the system. To help you keep track of those, you can have them forwarded to a certain mailbox that you designate, or it could be, a shared mailbox, so many people have access to view the invoices that are being acquired automatically into TimberScan. There's also an option here, emailed invoices, which will show you a listing of all the invoices the system has acquired automatically. And then once those invoices are in TimberScan, you're going to go to Invoice Entry and enter those invoices in TimberScan. Any notes that you might have made during the acquire step will pop up here for the user. And I thought what I would do here, I'll go through and show you invoice entry without OCR, and then I'll step back, show you some of the OCR setup, and then let you see the result of that over here, so you can see how the OCR works. So initially, I'm just entering the invoice without OCR, so all the data entry fields down here are empty. I should mention, I'm just working off a laptop here. In practice, what our clients are doing is they're breaking out the data entry screen and they're moving that to a separate monitor. So they'll have dual monitors and they do that side-by-side data entry, so you can see the whole invoice image and other related documents on one monitor, and on the other monitor, that's where you'll do your data entry. For me, I'm just gonna, scroll up and down here a bit, make that a little bit bigger so you can see it better. You can attach additional documents. So in this example here, if I wanted to attach a copy of a purchase order, I have an attach button here to do that. And I just go in and tell the system what document I want to attach to this invoice, select it, and it'll place it, right here next to it. You can also bring in emails. So had a few customers ask about that. So if you have an email that you want to drag and drop in that's related to this invoice, you can go ahead and do that. All right, as far as invoice entry, down at the bottom, the first thing I need to enter is the vendor number. If you know that, you can just go ahead and type it in. If you don't, like me, you go ahead and click on the lookup. So this is a lookup of all my vendors in Sage that I have in my test area here. I can do a search, maybe type in the first couple letters of the vendor name. It'll bring up these matches. I go ahead and double click, and it will go ahead and select that vendor for me. So this is vendor 1601. This is an example of the alerts. So if you get these type of messages when you're in Sage invoice entry, again, you'll get these same warnings here. So in this example, my vendor's insurance is out of compliance. Invoice number. I've actually entered this invoice before, but I do like to use it during demonstration just so you can see that we are checking for duplicates. So this invoice has already been entered. It doesn't matter if I entered it in TimberScan or I entered it in Sage, 10 years ago. We're still looking through that same AP invoice history file to check for duplicates. And when we find one, we'll go ahead and pop up a message here and let you know about it. I mentioned in the intro that we'll provide you with some additional information you can use during invoice entry. One of those items is down here at the bottom is the history button. So without leaving the invoice entry screen, in this example, perhaps this was a duplicate invoice and I want to see when it came in, when it was entered. One of the things you can do is click on that history button. So I'm staying in the invoice entry screen. I'm looking at the history for this particular vendor. So these are all the invoices that have been entered for power equipment rental. You can go ahead and search for the invoice that you're looking for. You can use this drop down, a little bit quicker to find your particular invoice. You can see when it came in, you can see that it's fully paid. And over on the right, there's a view button. So if you click on that, you can actually see, a picture of the invoice itself. And you can also see the approval. So the audit trail, behind the scenes, TimberScan's keeping track of when the invoice was received, whether you acquired it manually or we acquired it automatically for you. Who entered the invoice, who approved it. If it went through multiple approvers, you just have multiple approval boxes here. Who did that final review, and finally who posted it into into Sage 300. So you'll always have eyes on who approved the invoice and when, and if you're looking back at an invoice on history, whether it's in TimberScan or in Sage, you'll always have access to this approval page. Okay, so I'm back to invoice entry. I'm just going to change the invoice number here so I can continue. So in this first row, I'll just expand this up a bit. So in this first row, this is where I'm entering the header information on the invoice. And down here at the bottom is where I'm going to distribute it to whatever job and cost code. If you are using purchasing in Sage, we are looking at the commitment system here. So if I do a list, I can see any commitments that have been entered for this vendor. I can go ahead and select one. And when I do that, I'll be able to see the specific line items on this commitment. So it'll show me the job and cost code for each line item, the amount. If I continue to scroll over, I can see any approved change orders, what's been invoiced to date, paid to date, remaining balance, etc. So what you want to do here is just select the line item that this vendor's billing you for on this invoice, or if you click the button at the top, it'll just go ahead and select them all. And when you do that, it'll drop those line items into the invoice distribution area for you. And then you just distribute the invoice from there. Over on the right, we'll give you a summary of that commitment so you can see the total committed amount, what's been invoiced to date, what's in TimberScan, and then the balance. So in this case, it's negative. If you allow over invoicing in Sage, you'll be able to do that here as well. We'll just show you that the invoice is exceeding the PO in my example here by $14.25. All right, once the invoice is fully distributed, you go ahead and click accept. And again, that triggers TimberScan to look at the workflows, and this would go off for approval. But before I go to approval, what I'll do, I'll show you the OCR setup real quick here. So if I'm using the OCR program is called Capture. And what we ask you to do is set up a capture template. So you don't have to set these up for all your vendors. Typically, you're using the ones where you're getting a high volume number of invoices. And it's just a one-time setup and very straightforward, where for this invoice format, you're just telling us where we can find these specific fields across the top. So for Camco, it's just the local supply house here in Albany, I put in a copy of their invoice, and now I'm just going to go across and tell it, hey, this is where you can find the invoice number. You just place the box around where we can find that field on Camco's invoice. Over on the left, we'll show you what the Capture OCR program is going to read. So you can see here it's picking up the invoice number. I just made this box a little bit longer in case the invoice number grows. That's fine. You won't have to make any adjustments. And even if you're off a little, the OCR is pretty good. It still reads the information. It still finds the invoice number. So it doesn't have to be exact, but these boxes are just guidelines to help you get things in the right position. And then invoice date, same process. It's a little different color box. This is where the invoice date is. Balance due. Now, I like to use this invoice just because it's a little different in that the invoice amount, instead of being in a fixed position on the invoice, is floating. So it's in this position, but that's just because I have 2 line items on the invoice. If I had 5, the invoice total might be down here somewhere. If you do have those situations, what you do is you just highlight anywhere where the invoice amount could be. And over on the left, I've told it to use the read strategy that says, hey, read through that whole area and use the amount that's closest to the bottom. So in this case, it read through that area and just tells me, hey, the result is the 65.50. Description, if there's a certain description on your vendor's invoice you want to use, go ahead and let us know where that is. If they happen to put your job number on there, you can go ahead and highlight that. And what what we're doing now, of course, is filling in that distribution line, that second line of invoice entry. If they do put your commitment number, your PO number on there, tell us where that is. So instead of salesperson, if this was PO, you'd go ahead and highlight that field, and now we would know the purchase order number, the commitment number, when you got over to invoice entry. And the only other thing I want to point out here in the lower left is this invoice coding button. This is where you marry this template to the corresponding vendor in Sage. So this is a lookup of my vendors in my Sage area. So this is vendor 1103. So when this gets over to invoice entry, it knows the vendor number. And then the balance of these fields here, from commitment down to invoice type, are all just additional defaults that I can set that might make my life easier during invoice entry. So in my example, I'm saying, hey, everything I buy from Camco should go to a job, and it should always go to the category of material. So that'll be my default. Or I could use a default description. Or if it was, say a non-job supplier like Staples or something like that, you could put in a default GL account. So when we acquired an invoice for Staples, it would always come over with this GL account that I've defined here. So once the template's in place, you acquire a document, whether you do it manually or we're acquiring it for you automatically. If the OCR is in place, after it acquires it, it'll automatically look to see if there's a capture template. If so, then when you get over to invoice entry, instead of everything coming over blank, as it is here, we went through in the first example. In my second example, this is a invoice from Camco. So when I acquired that, went through the capture OCR and filled in all these fields for me, again, just based on what was on the invoice. It got the vendor ID from that coding profile and then read the invoice number, invoice date, amount, etc. All of these are just defaults, so you can always change these if the vendor put the wrong commitment number or the wrong job number on the invoice. Go ahead and correct that here. Cost code is up to you. We do have a lot of customers where they might know what the job is for an invoice, but they don't know the cost code. So they want the project manager or the super, whoever the approver is, to go ahead and fill that in. So we allow what we call partial coding. So I can actually save this invoice without putting in a cost code. I can click accept and it'll go out to the approver. And at that point, it's the approver's responsibility to put the cost code on the invoice form. All right, as far as approvers, I guess just real quick before I jump to approval, I'll show you one report, which is the invoice status report. We do have a number of dashboards that I kind of skipped over. These are configurable. This is where you can see what invoices are with what users for review and approval. But many clients also use this report. Nice thing about this report is it has drill down. So I can see that, hey, I have 84 invoices here in TimberScan. If I drill into that, I can see the status of each of those invoices. I've got 51 here in data entry that I've started to enter, haven't finished, but more importantly, these are my ones out for approval. So I've got one with this user for $51, and I have 7 invoices with Mike McGuire, project manager, for $220. And if I dig into that, then I can see when the invoices were assigned to that user, who the vendor is, the invoice, etc., and a button over here to click on the image if I want to see a picture of that invoice. So good tool, many ways to do it, but a good tool here to just have a visualization of the invoices that are out with the approvers. The approvers, again, will get an email that they have new invoices to approve, and they will go to the internet to view and approve their invoices. So in this case, I'm logged in as my one approver, Mike McGuire, project manager. These are the invoices that are with me for approval. It shows me a listing of them here across the top. The approval could be as simple as just clicking this approve button here at the bottom. But most of our clients don't do that. They have us disable these approves buttons on this first screen here, so the user just doesn't go through and approve everything without looking at it. So when that's disabled, that drives the user to touch into the approval screen. Apologies for that. I guess I was in that screen too long. All right, so when I go into the approval screen, the first thing it'll show me is any notes that were entered during invoice entry, but it'll also show me the log. So as an approver, I'm going to see notes that were made during invoice entry for me, but I can also see the log. And the log, again, is my audit trail. It'll show me when the invoice was entered, when it went for approval. So perhaps I'm the third person in the approval workflow. I can see who approved it before me and when, and perhaps any notes that they made. I'll be able to see that here. Same options as before. I won't go through it again, but I can do annotations and put on sticky notes and things like that. I can also add documents if I have, perhaps I'm at a field office, a trailer, I have, maybe a receiving slip or something like that I want to attach. You can just click that add page button. There's a delete page button as well. You can disable this if you want to make sure no one is, removing any of the documents from the invoice. Over on the right is where I can see the coding. So this invoice was charged the job 03001. If I've given the user access, I'll be able to click on this drop down here to say change the cost code. So it's retrieving the cost codes for me now from Sage. And again, if I have access, I can go ahead and select what cost code. I can change it if it came over blank. If I was using the feature in TimberScan where I don't have to enter the cost code using the partial coding, then I would go ahead and fill that in here. I could add additional lines, or again, if I'm a user that doesn't have access to that, you don't want them changing anything on the invoice, then I'd be able to see where the invoice was charged with these buttons here on the right would all be grayed out. The functions for the approvers are across the top. They can approve it. They can reject it. If you reject it, we'll ask you who you're rejecting it to. So my workflow here is very simple. I'm just going to one data entry person and one approver. But if I had multiple approvers in my workflow, I would see all those users. I could select who I'm rejecting this to, and then a reason. So if you notice now, the reject button isn't available because I haven't put in a reason why. Once I do that, then I can go ahead and click reject, and it'll come out of my work queue and go into the user that I'm rejecting it to. And this last thing I'll show you here as far as approval. If you do have users that would use their phone or a tablet, Chrome just provides an easy way to show you what that would look like without having to plug in my phone. So if I was using an iPhone 12, for example, it would render in this fashion, and then I would just scroll down to see the invoices, tap on one to go into it and go through the same steps as before. If I was using an iPad or a tablet, it just would build itself a little bit differently. So again, the system here is using what we call a responsive user interface, so it'll adapt to whatever device is connecting to this area. All right, after the invoice is approved, it comes back to this final review area. So in my test area, I have 21 invoices that have come back approved. So if I'm that final approver, reviewer, This is my opportunity to see any notes that the approver made, check all the coding, make sure everything looks okay. Again, I can override or change anything I need to here. I can attach additional documents. I can reject it, send it back to whoever. But if everything looks okay, I'll go ahead and click this Q for export. That sets it up to go over to Sage. And then when you're ready to send the invoices to Sage, you just click that button here and it'll tell you, hey, it's going to send these invoices over to Sage. So, in my example, I have 2 that are ready to go. I'd say yes. And then at that point, they'd be over in Sage 300 CRE. They arrive in Sage as unposted invoices. So you just need to go over and post those. And if you do make any changes after that, there's nothing you need to do on the TimberScan side. Again, we have a tight integration with Sage. So if you use that change invoice function in Sage, again, nothing you need to do on the TimberScan side. We'll know about that right away. And probably the last thing I'll show you in TimberScan, and I'll jump into the payment portion. It's just one of the inquiries. Very popular part of the system, very powerful, is this job cost inquiry. So this would be an example. This would be an example of an easy way to get information out of TimberScan. So whether it's for perhaps a T&M job or a cost plus job where you need to supply copies of your AP invoices with your invoice that's going to your customer. This is an easy way to do it. Just go ahead and tell us what job and the date range. So if it was for a monthly requisition, say, you could put in June 1st to June 30th. For my example here, I'll just go ahead and select all dates and click OK. So this will show me a screen very much like a spreadsheet. These are all the invoices that are for that one job I selected. And if I want to remove any of these, you just right click and exclude. So if it was for a requisition, you wanted to get a certain invoice out of there, just do that with a right click. If everything looked okay, you can click export to Excel. You can always reconfigure these columns. You can drag and drop and move them around. You can sum up a column like I've done here. If you wanted to push it to Excel, again, click that button. But more commonly, customers will click on that report button. And what you're doing here is you're creating a PDF of this document along with the invoice images. So what I've told the system here is to go ahead and create a PDF. And I'll just give this name and put this on my desktop. So I'm creating a PDF of this information. I gave the PDF a name of test, and it's going to appear on my desktop. So it's taking this information that we see on screen here and putting that into Adobe. So I have a summary page. And now, as you can see, it's retrieving all the images behind each of these invoices. So when I open that PDF, I'll be able to see the summary screen and all the invoices behind it. Now, if I can find this on my desktop. All right, so here's the result of that, a listing of the invoices, a total of 596,000. And then as I scroll down, I can see all the invoices that make up that 596,000. All right, so I'm going to shift gears here. That's TimberScan AP automation. And I'm going to go into payment automation. All right, payment automation, real brief background. Avid Exchange acquired TimberScan about a year and a half ago in 2021. And Avid Exchange has been around 22 years. Large public company, 1,700 employees, 7 offices, 8,000 customers, 825,000 suppliers are being paid through the AvidPay network, which is a total of about $150 billion over the past 5 years. Avid Exchange is a public company, as I mentioned. Their symbol, if you're interested, is AVDX on NASDAQ. And what we're doing here is after the invoices have gone through the TimberScan approval system, this is where you would use Avid Exchange to pay those vendors. And to do that, the process is very simple. You're going through Sage, selecting your invoices for payment just as you do today. So you're still in total control of who gets paid and when. The only difference is instead of printing checks, so instead of loading in checks into a printer and printing those out, we're going to provide a print driver. So if you can see this, okay, this just says print to Avid. And what that does is take that payment information, instead of sending it to the physical printer, it's creating a file that can be read by TimberScan. So, for example, you go ahead and you select 20 vendors you want to pay and those invoices behind it. You go to print checks in Sage, and instead of printing to a printer, you select the print driver. What that does is take that file and send that over to TimberScan Go. So what you're doing here is we're going to look at, say, the check signer's view. So instead of printing the checks out, finding the invoices that go with each of those checks, maybe paper clipping them behind the check, and then they go to the check signer so they can see the check and the invoices behind that, we're going to do that all electronically here. So I'm in TimberScan Go. I'm in what we call pay control. So after that file has been sent to TimberScan, this is where I can view each of those payments. So if you have an approval process here, if somebody wants to look at these and approve these one by one, this is what I would go through. This will be the check signer's view. Some of our clients don't. They, say, hey, once I print those checks, I just want those to release automatically. So there is an approve all button to do that. And we can even automate that further where you don't have to click that. Instead of, coming here and click approve all, it'll just automatically be released to the AvidPay network. All right, but since most companies do like to look at each one of their payments individually, I'll go through that. So this is, again, a listing. These are the vendors that I'm paying, that I selected to pay from Sage. I'll see a listing of them here, and I'll just click Browse All. So it'll go to the first payment, and it'll show me who I'm paying and how much. So we present it to the user as kind of a check stub, so they can see the stub that I'm paying Kingston Plumbing. Below it here are all the invoices. For this one example here, I just have one invoice, but if I had multiple, I'd see each of those lines down here, and then I could click to see that invoice. Over on the left is the invoice I'm paying for this $21.55. And if I scroll down, as a check signer, not only can I see the invoice, but I can see the approval. So I want to make sure that it went through the approval process. The PM said it was good to go. He approved the invoice. If this looks okay to me, I click approve. And what that does is that releases it to the AvidPay network. So what happens next is AvidPay receives a notification that an invoice or payment is ready for one of your suppliers. So we'll go through that database of 825,000 suppliers. If they're already in the network, we know how they want to get paid. And again, their options are either a paper check or electronic payment. If they're not in our network, then we will contact them, let them know they have a payment waiting for them from your company. and present the options to them, ask them how they would like to get paid. If we're unable to reach them, then what we do is we just cut them a check, put it in the mail, and we'll reach out to them in the future to see if they wanted to change their payment method going forward. Once I click approve, then I'm just going to the next payment. I continue through this process. Again, not signing checks, I'm viewing what I'm paying and who, and I'm approving one individually, and then AvidPay takes it from there. The process, again, very simple. Select the invoice for payment, and then go through the process as I described before. Just want to discuss some of the reasons we've heard from customers why they're doing this. So they're using AvidPay for payments for a number of reasons, one of which being, hey, they're still in total control of who they're paying and when. They go through the same process of selecting invoices for payment in Sage. The only difference is, again, instead of printing to a printer, I'm just creating a file, releasing it to TimberScan, view the invoices, approve them one by one, and then AvidPay takes it from there. Makes the process simpler, especially now where more and more people are working from home with the pandemic or whatever. The check signer doesn't have to be in the office to view who's being paid and when. It can all be done electronically. On the back end, you're having the savings of you don't need check stock anymore. You don't need envelopes. You don't need to go through the process and spend the time of attaching the checks to the invoices, getting those signed, putting them in envelopes, getting them stamped and mailing them out, etc. Many of our clients have come to us specifically to use AvidPay because they've had an instance of check fraud. So we'll eliminate that. You're using AvidPay. The burden of responsibility, get your vendors paid, shifts to us. So fraud is eliminated. The benefit on the vendor side, so what your vendors will gain from this if they have payment options. They can choose to get paid electronically. They can still continue to get a check. And honestly, most of the subs and suppliers, that's what they're doing today. They get checks, but they do have options. So, prior to working for construction software companies, I was a controller, and it did have times where money was tight, trying to make payroll or loan payment or something like that, that I needed the money right away. With AvidPay, I can do that. So if I'm a supplier using AvidPay, I can get paid via virtual card. And the virtual card makes my money available instantly. Once I click a button, I'll get a 16-digit number from MasterCard, and that virtual card then makes the funds available. I don't need to deposit it, wait for anything to clear. I have access to that right away. Other options: maintain your existing bank relationship. You don't need to make any changes with your bank or anything like that. You'll also have real-time visibility into payment status. So in TimberScan, you can run a payment inquiry, and you can see the status of each of the payments. So whether that user got a check or a virtual card, you'll be able to see how they were paid through that inquiry. And maybe instead of jumping into that, I'll just show you the results. So this, make that a little bit bigger. This one supplier went with a virtual card, so I can see the results of that. This is the proof of payment. This is when the virtual card was issued. These are the invoices that were paid. And you can see it's attached to this invoice packet. So this is another advantage of using AvidPay. When the vendor is paid via AvidPay, this proof of payment document will automatically attach back to TimberScan. So you see the invoice, you see the approval, and then when they're paid, you'll have that proof of payment document that's also attached to that invoice packet. And finally, I'll end with this. AvidPay, we have a nice promotion going on right away. Many of our customers, when I have discussions with them, they're very interested, but they might want to maybe try it before they fully commit. So we have a no-cost, risk-free option available through the end of September 30th, where you can use AvidPay at no cost. Only thing we ask is that you pay half of your payments through AvidPay, and just see what the experience is like, go through it, and then you can decide if you want to expand it from there. The other thing we have is a rebate program. So many of our clients will get rebates back by using AvidPay. So you can have a profit center, if you like, where you're actually making money by using AvidPay, and that's in the instances where the rebate exceeds the cost of using AvidPay. So two options here. You can use the no cost, no risk-free option. Again, that's available as part of a promotion through September 30th. It might be more advantageous, depending on the number of payments you cut and process each month. It might be more advantageous to use the AvidPay rebate program. And with that rebate program, we're sharing a portion of the rebates with our customers. And again, to do that analysis, we would ask you for some information, and at that point we can let you know whether it's more advantageous to use the rebate program or to simply go with the no cost, risk-free through September 30th. So we're at 11:52 here. I think I better just pause and see if there's any questions. If you do want more information on TimberScan or AvidPay, please contact Ocr or reach out to Avid Exchange directly. And with that, I'll turn it back to Megan for any questions.
Thanks, Jim. That was a great presentation. Right now, there are no questions in the chat box, but I will unmute all of our participants to see if they have any questions. Does anybody have any questions at all? Okay, if not, thank you very much. We will conclude the webinar now, and thank you again for joining us, and everybody have a great day. Thanks again. Bye now.